right, I gotta go. Love you. All right. Hello.
The email. Mine just came on. I was just able to, it was grayed out before, so I was just able to, join as a speaker. But Beth doesn't have. She said she doesn't have the email.
All right. It said I sent it. I'll email it to her again.
Okay, sorry.
Oh, you're good. I gotta figure out what I'm doing differently with Rick.
Yeah, because this is
Rick can start the shows, so you should be able to. Both of you should be able to.
But when I'm grayed out, it doesn't. And then so I don't know if you did something because all of a sudden it came on. But it just came on just as just as I was calling you. It finally came on. So
yeah, I just sent Beth the link.
Okay, again. She should get on soon then. Alrighty. Oh, yeah. Alrighty, good. And should I mention to her about Heart Month?
Yeah, if you want.
Okay, yeah. Okay. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye. Hello there. Connected with Beth Wyman, it says. So can you hear me?
You.
Hello.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now.
So I am trying out something new and doing this from my phone today.
Oh, really? Good. Ron has it set on his phone. I don't yet. So
I figured this is where I do all of my podcast listening from. So I wanted to see what the like listener experience would be like. So I'm testing it out to see what it's like.
You're loud.
I'm sitting in front of my computer in case anything goes wrong and I needed to.
Oh, wonderful. Well, it's 11:59, so we're going to start our program today. So I'm welcoming everybody who's listening, and this is the Optimize Your Life podcast, brought to you by the Hope Collection. And today we have the privilege and honor of listening and having Nutrition Matters with Beth Wyman, who is a registered nutritionist. Is nutritionist and dietitian, are they equally the same?
They are not, and that is a wonderful place to start. I am sure we've covered this at some point, but it has been a while. So they are not the same. And this is a question I get a lot. And then the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, who oversee our governing body, the CDR. What does CDR stand for? I gotta look it up now. But they tried to do a campaign to bring nutritionist into our title. So technically, I can go by certified dietitian nutritionist or register. So in New York State, I'm a certified dietitian nutritionist. Okay. Nationally, I can say either registered dietitian or registered dietitian nutritionist, either one. And it was a little bit of an effort to, well, not a little bit, but it was definitely an effort to bring back that nutritionist component and take it under the umbrella of our registered dietitian status. I'm looking at it now, it's going to bother me. Commission on Dietetic Registration is what CDR stands for. There we go. Thanks, Mary. So you can use either one. I tend to use RD still, registered dietitian, just because that's what I'm accustomed to.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but a registered dietitian, right, has a 4-year undergraduate degree, typically in nutrition science, dietetics, but it's regulated in terms of which types of classes and what key competency areas are covered in their undergraduate education. After that, we have to apply and then complete typically a year-long internship
Oh,
um, in dietetics, and then we can sit for the national board certification to get those nice letters after our name.
mm-hmm.
Um, they have recently changed it that dietitians will all need a master's degree before they can sit for that exam.
Wow.
A lot of internships already give graduate level credits or are combined with a master's level degree, but this would be much more sweeping. So, like, I started as a dietitian with just my undergrad and the internship without a master's. Um, I'm looking up when they're going to do, yeah, starting in January of 2024, this went into effect, where to take the registration examination, dietitians needed to have a graduate degree along with their internship. So, you know, just another step. And I mean, it's a big barrier, right? Suddenly you need a graduate degree, and the interesting part is that our salaries did not change. So now, so it's like, yes, you need this extra education. However, employers didn't recognize the additional work and aren't providing additional salary. Um, I see a question in the chat with the boards. Do you have to renew and retest or do continuing ed? Yes. So we need, I believe it's 75 hours of continuing education every 5 years. And so you have to submit a learning plan of your areas of focus that you want to maintain your competency in, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then your continuing education needs to line up with your learning plan. There are so many different areas of dietetics, right? There's in our internship, it's looped into some really big categories. It's looped into um, food service, clinical, outpatient, and long term care and community based nutrition education. So, and that doesn't even encompass everything. There's spots for dietitians within like state and federal policy levels. There's spots for dietitians in retail settings, in different food manufacturing settings, regulatory agencies like the FDA and USDA, especially USDA with inspections of different processing plants, like specifically
Oh,
meat
sure.
processing.
Yeah.
So there's such a variety. You can work with in the realm of like inspections and things that you could work on, like health inspections. You can do like kitchen inspections and things like that. There are just a variety of things. It's not always um, nutrition counseling, nutrition education, and medical nutrition therapy. It can be so many different things, and so this way you can focus your continuing education not again on everything, but specifically on what you've tailored your career towards,
Mm-hmm.
which is super helpful. Because I find it really helpful because it it's a way for me to actually go look for resources to stay on top of my areas of interest. right? Because then I can go to like the Commission on Dietetic Registration website and find out what is eligible for continuing ed, guide me towards different places or publishers or conferences that will help me just stay on top of what's going on in my field.
Mm-hmm. I see that.
So, yeah. And then by contrast, a nutritionist is not a regulated term.
Oh.
Anyone can give themselves that title. There are some certification programs that you can go through where it's like a couple month certification course to give you a really, really general overview of surface level nutrition information. So, like a little bit of a dive into calories and macronutrients, kind of a thing, and maybe a little bit into like motivational interviewing and counseling techniques to elicit behavior change in whatever clients you're working with. But it's certainly not the depth or breadth of information that you would get from an undergrad degree or the additional education that you would get with a master's. Interestingly, my master's is not in nutrition, it's in public health.
But I can see that how it's tied in.
Yeah, yep. And so, especially with like the work I'm doing now, is public health focused, but from the lens of nutrition as a social determinant of health and nutrition security as a like a health risk factor. So yeah, they're definitely tied together.
And with the coming from a law background, law, continuing education was always a very big thing in law, but because laws change, well, so does nutrition knowledge and food processing and things. I can see how that would change. You'd have to keep up on it. Looking at my mom's old college books, um, for nutrition, and she was a home ec teacher, and looking at some of her books, I can't wait to get that in your hands. I'm sorry when we got together that I forgot to bring it, because something from the 40s, early 50s, I'm sure has changed quite a bit.
Yes, and it's so interesting to look back at some of the things that were recommended and why they were recommended. And it's, not just looking at like, I don't know, a lot of people think of nutrition and dietetics as herbalism, right? Of like, oh, well, use these herbs or eat this plant or something to solve all your health problems. So not even talking about those things that used to happen in the past, just looking at like how you were told to set up your plate for healthy eating, or what we were told was a healthy body type, or a healthy weight and how to get there, or just the things that we genuinely didn't know about. I mean, that like you can say, oh yeah, I know this was healthy, but to know, I don't know, fiber always comes to mind, like the impacts that fiber has on varying conditions, right? So looking at how different types of fiber impact cholesterol, or satiety, so how full you feel for how long, and blood sugar management, and knowing that it's going to slow down digestion and your blood sugar won't go up as fast. Um,
Mm.
yeah, there's all different things that have come out as to more specifically how it works and how it can be replicated. Um, so research, so that's another area of nutrition or I guess another area where dietitians can come into play is research.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. In the chat, somebody said gluten being good or bad, or eggs. So there's always these trends that come and go, right? And that's just another an entire another realm is media literacy, I guess, right?
Yes.
Of knowing, like, okay, like this says gluten's bad, but am I really the target population for this? Or what is the impact of gluten on my body specifically versus somebody else's? Or same with eggs. Like, if my rule of thumb with eggs is usually like, if you don't have any issues with your cholesterol, I don't, it is what it is. They're going to fit into your diet. They're an excellent protein source and they're super convenient. And they used to be really cost effective, not so much now.
Yeah.
Um, my mom texted me yesterday from Walmart and was like, eggs are 45.5 cents each.
Yeah. We just paid $6.50 for a dozen eggs.
Yeah. She bought a case of 18 eggs and she's like, it comes out to 45.5 cents for each egg. It's wild.
Yes, yes. And I know it will fluctuate and it will go down, but it's right now it's kind of crazy. My dietitian, who I met
Mm-hmm.
um Monday morning, she said I'm my problem is I'm not getting enough protein.
Yep.
Because, okay, what did you have for dinner? What did what are you eating? What do um and she said at least twice or three times a week I should have eggs. Um, and the other times just try some peanut butter or something. I just need to get um, I just my I just need to get more protein. So um, but I'd really like that that you differentiated, and that it's it's not just a dietitian, nutritionist, isn't a dietitian is the real thing. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
That you studied, and I can see that there's everything from um, school lunches to nursing homes to um, a meat processing plant. I can see why it's so important, and really is so many different avenues to explore. Um, so that's really cool.
It's and it's so interesting because I feel like the common perception of dietitians is that we focus on weight management is what it's called. Or specifically, I feel like the general
Mhm.
narrative is like that we focus on weight loss even more specifically, and that's
Right.
just not the case at all. There's so many things that we focus on beyond weight, um, but it's always looking at the impact of food on health is the general piece there.
I can see that.
Yeah. So that's always a good question of what is the difference. And it is, if you think in the grand scheme of things, it's definitely still an emerging field. It has not been around as long as like the entire field of, if you think of like medicine as healthcare, right?
Hmm.
The field of medicine has been around much longer than the field of dietetics. So we're still kind of like in our infancy and paving our way in the world. So there's education that's needed to the general public as to who we are, what we do, what our background is, what our expertise is. I there used to be this doctor in the hospital that called us the grass ladies. That we just went around and told everybody to eat grass. And I'm like, I don't think that you have any sort of understanding as to what we do. But okay.
Hmm. Hmm.
Like, it's, yeah. Eh. And it is frustrating sometimes. And I wish that there was something easy to, like, hand out or reference or be like, go take a look at this website. And it'll tell you all of the different places that dietitians work, and I'm sure something like that exists, and I just don't know where to find it. A nice infographic. I'm a big fan of an infographic. Put that. Or actually, you know where else there's dietitians? Emergency preparedness.
Oh.
And so that comes up when you have emergency situations, natural disasters, things like that, in terms of food planning and making sure that people can still get fed.
Mm-hmm.
And with a lot of organizations that serve food regularly, so think like hospitals, they will actually have to have an emergency food plan of what to do if the power goes out for an extended period of time and things like that. There's typically an alternate menu full of like peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. um, that can be drawn upon if there's an emergency.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
Yeah. So I'm trying to think of what I actually wanted to talk about today.
I was just going to say, I hope I didn't get you off your thought of
I don't know.
what you had planned for today.
No, I need to start writing it down instead of it just living in my head, because then I start like going off and don't come back to it always. But that's okay.
Oh.
Excuse me. So I don't even know. There's so many directions I could go. We could talk about more food safety things, or my head has been very much in like this food as medicine space lately, which I know we've talked about. February is Heart Health Month. Thank you for the
Mm-hmm.
reminder. So, and I know we've talked some about a heart healthy diet on here before. It was almost a year ago. I think it was over the summer because I remember I did it outside and it was warm. But so cardiologists are a group that also talk about eating and the impact of food on your health a lot as well. And they have a lens that works, right? They're aware of how food impacts your heart health. Sometimes what they tell you to do to get to that is not always nutritionally sound advice, let's say, but they have good intentions, because nutrition certainly does impact. So what you eat impacts your heart health. You're not going to completely fix all of your issues by changing what you eat, but you can certainly help a lot of them. Specifically for heart health, if you're talking about just blood pressure issues, so high blood pressure and hypertension, that's when you want to go with a low salt diet. And this has become so much easier to do. What you would do is on food labels, on the nutrition facts label, you would look for ideally 140 milligrams or less of sodium. So a low sodium diet is 1,500 to 2,000 milligrams of sodium a day. I tend to go towards the 1,500 milligrams, and what this does is it helps lower your blood pressure. So conversely, for somebody who has trouble keeping their blood pressure up, you need more salt.
Okay.
Yeah, so there are both ends of that spectrum, and sometimes we forget that there's multiple ways somebody might be needing to influence their health. Not everyone needs low salt,
Mm-hmm.
but for those that have high blood pressure, it's super helpful to limit that. It used to be that, and speaking of things changing, right? It used to be that you'd say, oh, watch out for canned and processed foods. And that has certainly changed. There are so many canned options now that are low sodium. especially like canned beans and canned vegetables. You can find a lot of them with no added salt.
Mm-hmm.
And
Even
so,
soups,
what was that?
progressive soups has low salt um recipes, or
Yeah,
cakes. I used to get that from my mom.
exactly. Yep. And so those now there's some differences, right? So low salt has to meet a certain requirement. And then lower sodium usually says, right? Lower sodium just means it has, I believe, 30% less than the original product. So it may still be a high sodium product, it's just not as high as the original.
Okay.
Um, One of these that I've definitely seen is like taco seasoning. You can get a lower sodium taco seasoning, but it's still a high sodium product. Um, so it's yeah. I think that that's funny. You have to really know what you're looking for and what words to look for in order to do it right. Right. At the end of the day, some of it is marketing and trying to get you to buy a product. So um, yep. So low sodium's been a little bit easier to find, which is so helpful for those folks that have high blood pressure and need to work on lowering their salt intake. An area where I found that it's still super high sodium, and we don't necessarily always realize it, is in frozen meals.
Mm.
So, yeah, it's TV dinners have come a long way, but the sodium content is still super high. And part of this is for flavoring. Um, and especially if it's frozen, the preservation method there is the freezing. And so a lot of it is the taste component and trying to get it to still taste good. So putting salt in, and sometimes in terms of like marketing, right, you might see like, oh, well, this is made with sea salt and things like that. It's still salt. It still has that sodium component. Um, what changes is that sometimes it's like saltier, I guess. How do I describe it? So, like, sea salt will have a saltier taste, so you don't need as much. Or, like, Himalayan salt might have a saltier taste, so you don't need as much, right? And that's where those things come in, and where that sort of health halo for like sea salt came about was because you might not be using as much of it, so maybe it's a little bit lower sodium, but you would still want to check the label and see if it's meeting your requirements for a low sodium product. Here's the other thing once you get into alternative salts. So, like your sea salt and pink Himalayan salt, they're not iodized. So, iodine deficiency causes goiters, and this was a public health issue at one point. And the solution to the public health issue was to iodize the salt. And then you had more widespread iodine intake and a reduction in the prevalence of goiters. So, speaking of the intersection of public health and nutrition, there is one big example. So, every time that you're choosing a different type of salt that's not iodized, you're reducing your iodine intake, and so it's like, are you getting iodine from other sources? I know shrimp have iodine.
Yes, I was just going to ask, what else has iodine in it? If
Seafood is one of the big ones. So especially if you're not like a seafood eater, and think like historically, seafood is something that would really only be available on coastlines. So you had a huge section of the country that didn't have access to seafood necessarily. Um, it's so if you're not regularly eating like fish and shellfish, that iodized salt becomes even more important. So there's all kinds of different different things. Same thing with bread. Bread is fortified with a lot of B vitamins.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yes.
and that's typically because they're stripped out of the product and then returned. Um, so it's, if you want to talk about a processed food product, a lot of times that's when we think of our ultra processed foods, we think of like Cheetos and things like that. But what's often forgotten is that bread is absolutely a processed food product, like absolutely processed. It's very much enriched and fortified with different things that you would not normally find in bread if you were to make it yourself at home. Um, and that's not bad. There's nothing bad about that. It just is. And it brings some recognition to, like, okay, well, do we need to demonize all of these foods because they serve some benefit at times, right? Like, I'm not having pure unadulterated salt. I'm having iodized salt, but it's to my benefit. Um, so it's not processing. And yeah, well, processing does not mean that a food is bad suddenly for you. There's definitely reasons that those things happen.
Mm-hmm.
So back to heart health. um, so high blood pressure, low sodium. Additional heart healthy benefits are things like adequate fiber intake. The general recommendation is 25 to 30 grams of fiber per day for adults. Um, that can vary for other reasons too, but that's, like I said, the general recommendation. So every little bit counts. For a product to be considered, or a product or food to be considered a high fiber food, it has to have at least 5 grams per serving. And that's actually really hard to get to. So, like, back to my bread example, it's hard to find a bread that's got 5 grams of fiber per slice because you start to lose out on the texture of the bread. It becomes a lot more stiff and cardboardy and not as palatable.
Mm-hmm.
So there is a balance to be found there. So if you find a slice of bread that's got 2 to 3 grams of fiber, that's pretty good. And then you think if you're having a sandwich, you're having 2 slices. So all those things come into play. So adequate fiber is important. Fiber intake helps with reducing cholesterol. And then it's also important to watch your your added sugar, so high fat, high sugar food intake as well. This is one where in practice I could directly see it impact blood tests or lab work, right? When I had somebody come back with their cholesterol panel and I could see that their triglycerides were high. Triglycerides are a combination of fat and sugar that floats around in your blood. And now remember, you're always going to have some of these. It's the goal is not zero, but there is like an
Right.
upper limit where suddenly it's becoming dangerous if you have too much. But I could tell you how the person had been eating based on their triglyceride numbers.
Mm-hmm.
Because whenever people had started getting off track, going more towards like high fat, high sugar, refined foods, their triglycerides would go up. And it never failed me to
Yes.
be able to see that direct correlation and then help guide people back towards like high fiber whole grains, increased fruit and vegetable intake, reduced mindless snacking, because those tend to be like our, oh, I'll just grab a piece of chocolate or I'll grab a cookie, and all of those things add up. It's not that you never have them, they just become special occasion foods. So it's adequate fiber, low in excess fat or in excess um, or really any added sugar intake. You got to think you don't need added sugar. There's a natural sweetness to foods, and this is something that I've been working a lot on is maintaining a very low added sugar intake. Um, and it's everywhere, and it's in so much, and it's so common, and we don't necessarily think about it of like, oh, well, I'll stop and grab a latte. And it's like, well, what are you putting in there, right? Oh, well, I only use like their oat milk. I'm like, okay, well, is the oat milk sweetened? And then suddenly you have to go look, and oh, look at that, the oat milk sweetened. So you're right, you didn't add any like syrups to it, but because you chose a milk alternative that was pre-sweetened, you're having added sugar. Um, so it's hidden in so many things, and again, it's for flavor. So sometimes it's sometimes it's unavoidable. Like something that always comes to mind is tomato sauce. A lot of times there's sugar in tomato sauce to cut the acidity of the
Mm-hmm.
tomatoes. So chemically, it's serving a purpose to put the sugar in there to change the flavor so that it's more palatable, and cut some of the acidity of the tomatoes. Excuse me. I sat up straight and suddenly yawned. I realized I was like super hunched over. Yeah. But maybe that's like 1 gram of added sugar. And the general recommendation is to keep it under 26 grams of added sugar in a day. And that's a lot. Um, I know for a while yogurt was getting a bad rap. And part of the reason for that was all of the added sugar that's
Right.
found in yogurts. And it's to the point where some of them are essentially a dessert product. Um, so you have to treat them like that if you're going to eat it. It's
Mm-hmm.
instead of it being like, oh, a great breakfast, nope, you're eating a high protein dessert. And if you change the way you look at it, it's it's not as much of a surprise.
Right. You could
When
still
you're
have
if
it, but realize that it's a it's a treat, not a diet or item.
yeah, yeah, it can be a treat, or get plain yogurt. And what I typically do, well, I've actually been doing a couple different things, but plain yogurt with some vanilla and cinnamon. Sometimes I'll do a little bit of like stevia on it. And I've also been using yogurt to make dip for my carrots. So well, this is not low sodium. Um, I'll put like onion soup mix in like a sprinkle of onion soup mix on some yogurt and use that as a dip for my carrots. I've also done everything bagel seasoning. That works really well too. So there's other ways to do it rather than just adding or getting like a really sweetened yogurt product. Um, there's there's some information on the impact of saturated fat intake specifically on heart health, but I do remember seeing something recently that it might not have as much of an impact as we think, as long as you're having a reasonable amount. Um, what we t- Fat is something that's really really easy to overeat all of a sudden, especially because we start to think of these things that are, oh well, but it's a good fat. Yes, but if you have too much of it, it's still too much.
Right.
um so avocados are a great one for this because sure, yes, they're a good source of fat, but a serving size of an avocado is an eighth of an avocado.
Wow. So that's
Yeah.
a huge plop of guac on top of your salad.
So, and that's fine, but then you also have to look at what other fats are you adding in too, right? Are you doing guac and dressing and cheese and sour cream? Like, and suddenly it's like, where did all of this come from?
Exactly.
Um,
And
yeah. Um, so it's about balance, and we're just not good at moderation. Um, Americans are terrible at it.
right.
But that's what it comes down to is sure, yes, have the healthy fats, have your olive oil, have your fatty fish, have your avocado, but how much you have matters, right? I had somebody that was like, "Oh, but it's salmon, it's a good fat." I'm like, "Yes, but you ate a pound of
Oh,
it." So you're so close, like you're not so close actually, but this is where portion size comes back into play, and knowing what an appropriate portion is. And I mean, this truly comes from experience, I guess, um, doing nutrition counseling. But for a lot of people, measuring and weighing and writing it down is just not a reasonable task. It's an extra burden to their day, it's an extra barrier to actually making the changes. So you can, more power to you. I tend to do better when I write it down, and keep track of myself. But that's not for, honestly, what I've found, it's not for most people. Um, so the plate method is something that helps control portions without having to write anything down. If you're eating on a standard size dinner plate and you make half of your plate fruits or veggies, or fruits and veggies, I should say, um, and then a quarter of it your starchy food, so bread, pasta, rice, peas, corn, potatoes, that kind of thing, and then a quarter of it your protein food, so whatever meat, eggs, fish, that you're having, you're gonna do okay. It's gonna be close enough. Your portions are gonna be controlled. You're going to be getting in enough fiber. You're going to be getting in the protein that you need. So generally speaking, that simple plate method is enough to keep people going and in the right direction, improving their health, improving their lab work at the doctor's office, without making healthy eating this like overbearing, unobtainable thing.
right.
Um, and I've seen it in practice, right? Of somebody who I know is never going to write anything down, but we focus on using the plate method, we focus on meal timing, and you can still see a reduction in A1C, so better blood sugar control, or reduction in their cholesterol numbers, and seeing things like that, or their blood pressure is under better control because we've talked about label reading and changing the seasonings that they're using. So none of that requires tracking your sodium intake. A lot of times I feel like I mention numbers and people automatically think they need to like start a log and figure out how many grams they have per day. And it's like, no, if you go choice by choice, you can get close enough. Um, and that'll do it, because really it's an average, right? It's not only an average of how things happen that day, but how things happen over the course of like a week. And again, I'm talking mostly about like heart health type things. Um, for carbohydrate intake, it's not an average over the course of time if you have diabetes. It's definitely more nuanced than that, especially if you are taking insulin. But if we focus on heart health and heart healthy eating, it's definitely about the averages over the course of time. And so some other conversations I have are things like, that's great that you ate vegetables, but how many times did you do that this week? And if it's
Hmm.
only once, we've missed the point and we've missed the mark, and we need to adjust and um, and really bring into focus that it's something that needs to be done consistently, done every day. Now, are there going to be some days where it just doesn't happen and you don't get in all your fiber? Yeah, of course. But that becomes the exception, right? And then the general rule is that you're hitting these fiber goals. Um, Olive oil is another one, right, where it comes up as heart healthy fat and has this little bit of like a health halo to it, that you can have more because it's olive oil. Um, and that's not the case. It's still fat, and you still need to watch how much you're having and make sure that it's an appropriate amount. Um, I remember it was actually not even a client, it was a friend who was starting to log her food intake, and she's like, I put my I don't, she's like, I don't even use salad dressing. I just do olive oil and I put it in and it's so many calories. I'm like, well, how much are you using? She's like, 2 tablespoons. I'm like, yeah, that's a lot of olive oil for one salad. And yes, it is a good fat that I would want you to have, but that's too much. um,
Too much of a good thing is
for sure. And we, again, Americans are horrible about moderation, so we forget that there is, in fact, too much of a good thing. Um, yeah. So those, and then not a food item, but um, walking or some sort of like very low impact exercise, that is excellent for your heart health. It's a workout for your heart, right? And you would always want to check with your primary care provider or your cardiology provider, before trying new exercise. But these very low intensity exercise does not have to be anything crazy. Um, is so helpful in maintaining your heart health, in using up extra like triglycerides and things that you might have floating around in your bloodstream. So it's helpful in a variety of ways, and it certainly helps above and beyond just cardiovascular health. um, it also helps with what's called cardiopulmonary health too. So the health of your heart and lungs. So not just your heart and vessels, which would be cardiovascular. This is heart and lungs as well, and how they're working together to supply oxygen to your body. So there's so many functions running in your body that we just don't have to consciously think about. Um, and it's like wild. It runs itself, and we don't have to think about it. We're not consciously like, oh, am I getting enough oxygen right now? And well, and so actually, back to my yawn I had a minute ago, and now I'm going to yawn again. So yawning, we think of it as being tired, but it's also a way for your body to stretch your lungs, take a deep breath, and get in more oxygen. So chances are the way that I was hunched over before, I wasn't taking full breaths. And part
Mhm.
of the reason I subconsciously stretched out was to be able to take a full breath and get in more oxygen.
Yes.
And one of the ways that my body helped me with that was giving me a yawn, um, to force me to take a deep breath. So yawning does not always mean that somebody is tired. It could also be that they're just trying to get in more oxygen.
More oxygen. Yes.
Yeah, our bodies are pretty cool. They're
Yeah,
just trying to
it
survive.
really is. When you said that, it made me think of that. That um, I know when I was working, I had set my Fitbit to buzz at once an hour, so that I consciously stood up, stretched, and took a deep breath, because um, I would just be so focused on what I was doing sitting. And so again, it's you have, that movement. With my dietitian the other day, mentioned to me, one thing, I realized I do not drink enough. I do not have
Mm,
enough take enough water. Um,
me either. And
and
I'm a dietitian.
and so, I was saying about my skin just feels so dry. And she said, "Sometimes do you feel kind of sluggish?" Yeah.
Yeah.
and
It's one of the
so
first signs of dehydration is
yeah,
that increased fatigue and thinking that you need an extra cup of coffee when really what you need is water.
yes, yes.
Yeah.
Um, and and so that's what she was saying. Well, how much coffee do you drink? How much tea? I don't drink coffee or tea, but and a glass of fruit juice or 7 Up isn't the same. She said you just need the water. So I had a very nice bottle of orange juice, and the bottle was just so pretty. So I washed it, took the label off, and filled it with water because I like my water cold. And the water filter
Oh.
doesn't come out as cold as I like it. So now I have a nice bottle of water that I just finished one glass. I do have to go out to the kitchen and fill it up again. But again, and I think one of the beauties of a registered certified dietitian is that you give such good advice. Now, of course, it's up to the patient to follow that good advice, but by bringing it up, when she had said, "Well, what do you have for breakfast?" "Oh, honey nut Cheerios with either strawberries or bananas." "And what do you have for lunch?" "Well, I had a good salad and I had all these veggies in it." And she said, "And what protein are you getting?" And it made me
Yeah.
of the fact that I wasn't getting protein, and
And
the
it's
fact
not that
that
you were choosing, you know, bad foods, which I mean, I don't like to call any foods bad necessarily, but you were choosing very healthy options, but
but
missing a component.
missing a component. Yes, yes. But again, that's why this program on Wednesdays are so important because you just make us aware of things and you give such useful, helpful advice. It's like um, had an acquaintance that after she went through cancer, she just made up this ridiculous re- food regimen. To me, it was kind of ridiculous. Is that because she like denied herself anything that she liked. She lived on like flaxseed and that she and all this, but just I mean I can't remember all the different things, but it was just so bizarre. So she could never like go out to eat. She could never really go to anyone's house to eat because she had and it was just one that she made up. So again, having like my doctor is the one that gave me the prescription for this dietitian, which I
Yeah.
um really appreciate because I don't want to just make something up myself, because I don't know what you know.
And there's this, yeah, there's so much that you can look up and read online and things like that, but to distill it all and figure out what actually fits best for your health, just it's so much easier to go to a dietitian. They
Mhm.
can look at what's going on with you and they will know what is the best option for you, and then they'll work within your food preferences. They'll look at kind of what stage of your life you're in, what's coming up, what you need to be prepared for, right? And I know I've said on here like your protein needs increase as you get older. And so they'll see kind of where you are in that aging process and say, okay, well, we need to start ramping this up because this is coming. Um,
Right.
or if you suddenly start exercising more, they can say, okay, you're probably going to notice that you're hungrier around these times and what to put in and how to kind of help mitigate that so that you're not just reaching for snack foods if you have appetite changes or like oncology especially, right? So anybody that has cancer is going through cancer treatment, things like that. um, that is an area where it's just rampant with fad diets, misinformation, things that are factual but then are misconstrued in practice,
Mhm.
um, because it's a time of almost like panic where you'll grab at anything to see if it works. right? And so a lot of that ends up rooted in fear, and a lot of those food choices end up rooted in fear. And then it's like you're increasing your stress level surrounding foods, which is going to actually impact your digestion and your health outcomes because your stress level is high. Um, high stress can actually raise your blood sugar. Like
Oh,
it
sure.
impacts a lot. Yeah. So there's a lot to be balanced. And it's something that I've certainly worked on with plenty of people of taking some of that fear out of, like, if you have one meal that's off track, nothing bad happens. Or, like, here's the research behind the claim that you believe in, and showing that it's not supported by, like, huge studies, and huge, like, multi-study reviews and things like that, to try to help pull them away from that fear and make other choices that then alleviate this additional stressor that they've put into their life.
Yes.
Um, yeah, I mean, having done some work in oncology, you'd think that, oh, if you're going through cancer treatment, we want to make sure that you're eating, like, super, super healthy. And that's not necessarily the case. Sometimes it's just, how do I get extra calories into you so that you maintain your weight and survive treatment?
Actually, I gained weight.
Yeah, that is fine. I would have been so happy.
During chemo.
Yeah.
Because
I
if I
specifically
had an
worked with,
empty
like,
stomach, I
head
would
and
get
neck.
sick if I had an empty stomach. So, so I
Yeah.
didn't too much.
I worked primarily with head and neck cancer patients, so a lot of it came down to the physical ability to eat, and working around that. So texture modifications and fortified foods, and in some cases tube feedings and adjusting that and teaching the feeding process. So there's so much more. I mean, you want to talk about a processed food? Tube
Yeah.
feeding is a formula. Like, it's not food. You can get some where it says that it's made from real foods and things, but it's still not. You didn't blenderize the food and just shove it in a bag. Like, there's much more that happens to it
Mm.
to make it, like, stable for shipping, and it's not going to grow stuff.
Oh, dear.
That it's the right size. It's like the right size molecule to actually be digested and absorbed based on where the tube is inserted. So there's processed foods exist for a reason.
That's sure. Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh,
Um, so heart health, we did. Where's my? I wanted to check the chat. Okay, we're good. This is kind of cool doing it from my phone actually today.
good. Good. Yeah. I don't have it yet on my phone. Ron does on his. But this I really like this Podbean um, setup. We're working on a few glitches, but for the most part, once we're up and running, I find it so clear, and
It is.
um, I can see, and then people that type in a note, you know we can answer. We don't necessarily have the ability to have somebody um, call in, or start talking, other than the host, which actually turns out good in a lot of cases. But you do have the opportunity to just, send a message, or please
Yeah,
input your message. And so it will continue the conversation, which I find, just really, really nice. Um,
it is. It's nice. I like the chat feature. Um, yeah, I have some other questions for Mary about it at some point too. Um, just from the other side of, like, who we're reaching and things like that.
mhm.
But I'm always open to suggestions, and I believe that there's a way to leave comments on episodes once they're posted. So I'm always open to that. If you wanted to drop a comment of something that you want to hear about, there is an Optimize My Life Facebook group as well. So you can always hop over there, join that. I believe there's a comment. There is. There's a chat dedicated to Nutrition Matters, so you can always throw some ideas in there, questions that you have. I know there's been some episodes where I've done essentially a Q&A of collected questions from the week.
Mm-hmm.
So even if it's not a whole hour topic, sometimes I'll just take the questions and turn it into a Q&A type deal. So those are always welcome. You can always follow along on my Instagram is at Beth Wyman _RD. I'm vaguely active on there. It depends on my week,
Of
but it's
course.
there. It exists. And then my website is evolvedn, as in dietitian nutritionist.com.
Evolve. Okay.
Yeah, we can end. Do you mind if we end a few minutes
No,
early?
no, not at all. Not at all.
Okay.
So you have a wonderful, wonderful week. We look forward to hearing again next Wednesday. Next Wednesday, same time, noon to 1 p.m. Eastern U.S. time. And in the meantime, have a wonderful day. And again, thank you for joining us.
Thanks. Bye, Linda.
Bye bye.